All right, we're going to go over Form C, which is the trailer part of the pre-trip during the examination. So first thing we're going to do, I'm going to look at the bulkhead. I want to make sure that there's nothing missing, there's no holes, all the rivets are in place, there's nothing protruding out of it, which would indicate that your cargo had shifted. I'm going to look at the frame here down both sides. I want to make sure it's nice and straight, everything's properly mounted and secured, nothing's missing, bent, broken, cracked. While I'm looking down here, I'm going to look at my DOT tape. It should go the full length of the trailer and cover at least 50% of the space, which this does. And I'm going to take a quick look down the side of my trailer. I want to make sure all my rivets are in place. Again, there's nothing protruding, or there's no dents or things coming out, which indicate that the cargo is shifted in there. From there, I'm going to come down. I'm going to look at my landing gear. On my landing gear, I'm going to look at my supports. I want to make sure they're properly mounted and secured. There's nothing missing, bent, broken, cracked. I'm going to take my handle down. I'm going to make sure my landing gear goes up and down properly. When I'm moving, I want to make sure it'll stow away properly. And I'm going to look at my foot pads here, make sure that they're both in place, intact, they're properly mounted and secured, and nothing's missing, bent, broken, or cracked in that respect. Before I leave my landing gear, I also want to look and make sure I got enough space between my landing gear and my mud flaps to make sure if I make a tight turn, it's not going to rip those mud flaps off. I'm going to move down here. I'm going to look at my cross members. I want to make sure these are all properly mounted and secured. There's nothing missing, bent, broken, or cracked. And I'm going to take a look at the floor, make sure I don't see any holes in the floor as I work my way down. Go down a little bit farther here. I'm going to check my air hoses and my electrical lines. I want to make sure they got proper clearance from the ground. I want to make sure there's no abrasions, bumps, cuts, excessive corrosion on those electrical lines. I want to make sure the spacers are in place so my air lines aren't rubbing, and these look fine here. Now, on this trailer, there's a few things that are not on this trailer that may be on a 53-foot trailer or a different style. Those would be sliding tandems. This one does not have that. If it had sliding tandems, I would check to make sure that the locking pin that the locking pins are in place, that they're properly mounted and secured. I would want to make sure the release button is all the way in and secured, and I would check the frame itself to make sure that that's in good order. What also is not on this trailer, there's no shocks or shock mounts on this trailer, so I would check those much like I did the front there, and there's no airbag on this suspension on this trailer. So if there was, I would check it just like I checked the airbag up on the tractor. So that being said, I'll go over what is on this trailer. So starting with my brake components, I'm going to look at my brake hoses and my ABS line. I want to make sure there's no abrasions, bumps, cuts, excessive corrosion, and I'm listening for signs of audible leaks. From there, I'm going to look at my brake chamber. I want to make sure my brake chamber is properly mounted and secured. There's nothing missing, bent, broken, or cracked. I'm listening for signs of audible leaks, and I'm going to look at the collar on the brake chamber and pay special attention to that, make sure that's in good order. From there, coming out of the back of the brake chamber is a push rod and slack adjuster. I want to make sure those are properly mounted and secured. There's nothing missing, bent, broken, or cracked. If I was going to check those, I would chock the wheels, I would release the brakes, and I would pull on that. If there's more than 1 inch of play, I know that they're out of adjustments, and I would need to get those into the shop. From that point, I would look at my drum. I would make sure it's properly mounted and secured. Nothing's missing, bent, broken, or cracked. I'm looking for bluing, which would be signs of excessive heat, and I'm looking for any oil or grease that is in that brake drum that would impede my braking. Then I'm going to look at my brake lining. I want to make sure that that's all properly mounted and secured. Nothing's missing, bent, broken, or cracked. Again, I'm looking for oil or grease. And I want to make sure that lining is at least a 1/4 inch in thickness or more, because that would be a safe level for going out for the day. From that point, I'm going to look at my suspension. I'm going to look at my spring hangers, both front and rear. I want to make sure they're properly mounted and secured. There's nothing missing, bent, broken, or cracked. And then I'm going to look at the spring itself. I want to make sure the spring's properly mounted and secured. I want to make sure there's no excessive rust on there. There's no cracks. I want to make sure the springs aren't fanned out, and this looks just fine. I'm going to look at my U-bolts. I want to make sure my U-bolts are properly mounted and secured. There's nothing missing, bent, broken, or cracked. Make sure they're nice and straight, and these ones look just fine. Then I'm going to move to my rims and my tires. I want to make sure that my sidewalls don't have any abrasions, bulges, or cuts in them. I want to make sure there's a good bead to the rim on this side. And then I'm going to move to the tread on the tires. I want to make sure there's nice even wear on both of the duals. I want to make sure there's no foreign objects embedded in the tire. I want to make sure there's a proper depth for these tires, which is 2/32 of an inch. I would check that with a tire depth gauge. And these can be retreads because they're not steer tires. From there, I'm going to look in between the duals. I want to first make sure that the rims are totally seated together. I'm looking at those rims for any cracks or illegal welds. And then I'm going to look at the sidewalls in between the duals. I'm going to check them just like I did this one over here. And I want to make sure that there's no debris in between the tires. There's no foreign objects. And I want to make sure I got nice even spacing between the tires there. From there, I'm going to move out here to my outer sidewall. I'll check it like I did the other ones. Then I'm going to look at my rim. I want to make sure that there's no cracks or illegal welds. I want to make sure it's properly mounted and secured. And then I'm going to look at my valve stems, both outer and inner. I want to make sure they're straight, there's no signs that they're leaking, and that they have caps on them. It'd be at that point when I'd check my tire pressure with a tire pressure gauge. I would want to make sure that there's 100 pounds or manufacturer specifications as far as tire pressure goes. From there, I'm going to look at my lug nuts. I want to make sure that my lug nuts are properly mounted and secured. There's none that are missing, bent, broken, or cracked. And then I need to look to see if there's any signs that any of these lug nuts are loose. That would be shiny metal, metal shavings, any rust streaks that are running down would be indications of water getting in there because they're loose, and these look fine. Then I'm going to look at my hub seal here. I'm making sure this is properly mounted and secured. Nothing's missing, bent, broken, or cracked. I'm looking for any signs of leaks. If I wanted to check the level, I could pull this out, and there's a sight glass that would tell me what my fluid level was in there. When I'm done with this rim and tire section, I would look at my mud flaps. I want to make sure these are properly mounted and secured. There's nothing missing, bent, broken, or cracked. I want to make sure they're the proper length, which these are fine. When I move to the back of the trailer here, what I'm first going to do is look at my reflective tape. There should be white tape, both horizontal and vertical up at the top, which there is on the door. And I want to make sure my DOT tape on the door and on the bumper go all the way across, which these do. I'm going to check my door, make sure that it's working properly, which it is. And I want to make sure that my latch is working properly, which it is. I'd also take a quick look at my bumper, make sure everything's properly mounted and secured. Nothing's missing, bent, broken, or cracked there. From this point, I would check around the other side of the trailer just the way I did here. There's nothing unique to that side, so that would conclude the Form C.